SN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And we are back on the Financial Survival Network. Well, what if the new normal is what happened in the first quarter? Minus 2.9% growth or negative growth in the economy. And you and I both know actually that the decline was greater than that, but the inflation adjustment was kept way, way down to make it look, well, not quite as bad as it really is. Well, that's a question about capitalism, and that's why we've got Captain Capitalism on now. You know him well as Aaron Clarey. Aaron, welcome back.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hey, so hopefully your summer's going well, Aaron?
It's great. It's warm. I got the motorcycle out, did some motorcycle riding, smoking cigars, went on boat rides. Yes, absolutely taking advantage of the summer and not I'm maximizing my utility as all good economists do.
Hey, well, that's what it's all about anyway. And we're trying to do the same here. It's a little hot in Florida, but not terribly hot. So, hey, what are you going to do? So, look, we had those horrible GDP numbers in the first quarter. And of course, you can just blame it on the polar vortex or whatever, and everything will be fine the next quarter, right? Isn't it?
No.
No, you don't think so? It's not going to happen.
Here's it. You know what? I visited you during that polar vortex. Remember, I drove all the way down, and I was so happy. Oh God, it was like 80 degrees, and I was so excited. And Georgia the night before, 2 nights before, was 3 degrees. So yeah, it was a horrible winter. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not one to immediately run and say the media is just using the winter to excuse. So of that minus 2.9%, minus 4%, if you want to use a more reasonable GDP deflator. I think some of it was the actual weather, but there's one thing that primarily concerns me, and that is I went to the OECD and I looked up this country to our north. There's this country to our north called Canada, you see, and
I've heard
they
of that.
too, they too experienced this polar vortex, and because they're north, it was even worse for them. And while we posted a minus 2.9% economic growth for that quarter, Canada chalked up a 2.2 positive economic growth for that quarter. And I've had arguments, when I posted this on my website, people were saying, well, the Canadians are used to the harsh winters. It's like, wait a minute. We didn't have harsh winters. It doesn't get cold in winter in the United States. So and another thing is that the Canadian U.S. economies, we're different, but we're probably about as similar as Germany and Austria. I mean, there's not a lot of difference between the Canadian economy and the U.S. economy. So if you look at that, some of it could have been weather, but most of it is policy issues. And to simplify things a lot, they got Harper, we got Obama. They're conservative light, they're capitalist light. They have lower corporate taxes. They're not as anti-business as we are. And down here, we're rushing as quickly as possible to become the next, France or Italy or something. Mm-hmm. So it's bunk. It's not. I don't think. I mean, you never know. I think we would rebound a little bit from a minus 3% economic growth, but I would not be surprised if it's another negative quarter, and then that would officially put us in recession territory.
Yeah, and really, if they were honest about the inflation deflator, the GDP deflator, we've been in a recession for many years now, going back to 2008, 2009. I mean, that is the reality.
Yeah, and it's so sad that you can't rely on the standard statistics and metrics like GDP anymore. You gotta almost treat it like China now, where you got to use railroad tie replacement or energy consumption. And an honest economist can't make a living. Yeah, you really do. And if they're gonna tweak these figures and they're gonna make it, and then you got to go to your backup statistics. And what I like to do, I like to look at employment participation, and the good old GDP per capita, because I don't think the economists that are on the government dime that like to tweak these figures, they always fail. In other words, you can't just change the measurement for one economic statistic and then think, we're going to pull the wool over these people's eyes, because you'd have to do it for all of them, because there's other statistics you can use as proxies. So I like to use GDP per capita because I don't think they've tinkered with the population growth yet, and that's been stagnant. That's been stagnant since 2007, 2008. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If we're using old measures, I'd sell my motorcycle or put my motorcycle up for bet that we have been in recession for the past several years.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. And yeah, it's just amazing that the games they play. Yeah. Speaking of which, China today announced to the world that they have 7.5% GDP growth. Didn't that make you feel great?
If it's GDP, well, it would make me feel great if it was real. My concern is this, of that 7%, how many of them are malls that have no one in them, or entire fake cities with no one living in them? If we could do a broken window fallacy adjusted Chinese GDP growth, I'd be impressed. But yeah, it's the same thing here. This is why, I remember back in the 90s, when they started implementing their changes and everything, economists, they were rightly so. When I was much younger, they introduced me to the concept of, we got to use alternative measures because you can't trust the state media telling us what Chinese GDP growth figures are. So, and now it's the same thing here today.
Yeah, exactly. We're living in Never Never Land, right?
Right. Well, amazing. And getting back to my point about how you got to use alternative metrics, I know this is going to sound nerdy. I know this is old school. This is old hat. But one, again, where I don't think those criminal economists at the government have adjusted it is the inventory to sales ratio. And I know this is boring, but I've used it as a predictor because it's worked. It's worked in the past. And basically, it's, for any of your new listeners or people who have lives and don't study this stuff, inventory to sales, you take corporate inventories and you compare it to sales. And the reason you do that is if your inventories get too high and your sales too low, which would result in a high ratio, what that's saying is, all right, sales aren't coming through and eating through our inventories. Our inventories are building up. So now we got to cut back on employment and production. We got to let our inventories sell out before we produce any more inventories. And that statistic, you can find it at the Fed database to kind of get a visual. But the statistic is not good. It's been slowly increasing since about 2011, and typically its long-term trend is to go down because of efficiencies and improvements in processes and manufacturing and just-in-time inventory management, all that stuff. So the baseline of it is a general downward trend, except for the past 3 or 4 years, where it's been slowly creeping up. And if naturally there's some volatility to it, but this is not a statistical outlier. This is not the polar vortex, you can't blame that. This is now, it's trending upward, and it is it's not a surprise you got minus 2.9% growth, but it calls into question the long-term, non-volatile, non-one-off craziness in the polar vortex events that are going to affect the economy. This is going to be a drag on the economy and something that's going to really change its fundamentals towards the recession side.
Yeah, for sure. And you just see it. You just know that the economy is not expanding. And if it's not expanding, then it's contracting, right? Isn't that basically what it comes down to?
Yeah, or it's stagnating. And it's a question of what kind of country do you want to live in? I mean, there's the new normal, and we're going to fundamentally change America. Well, to what? A social democracy where everything's fair and we sacrifice excellence and growth. And unfortunately, that's what it looks like the American people want. They voted in Obama twice. I don't know how the Democrats stay in business. But really, this performance,
they're both crime families. Let's face it. Both parties are crime families, right?
Right. But but they're put into office by the people, and the people, they think, this is great, equality. We have to have equality at all costs. Well, okay, here it comes. We're going to have a stagnating economy. Excellence in production is going to be punished. You're going to have a malaise, and it's going to be like Japan has been for the past 20 years. And people are going to be, well, yeah, but yeah, that's what, that's why I see my little crystal ball and all my little charts and data. And it's one of malaise and stagnation. And not yet dropping it. Well, actually, I can't even say that. I have one of my favorite charts I've put together is the rolling average GDP growth. And it's a scary prospect, but not to give a boring economic lessons, economic growth is very volatile. So if you throw up GDP growth rates, you can't see a trend. So what I did is I took a 20-year rolling average where you average out 20 quarters and then you get a data point and you move, the next quarter overtake that next 20 and so on and so forth. And the chart is the scariest thing ever because it shows like this general decline in our overall economic growth rate. So back in the 40s to the 60s, we were growing at 4.25%. Now we're growing at only 2.25%. Heck, with the more recent GDP figures are more around like 2.2% or 2.1%. And if you extrapolate that chart, what that means is if we're not stagnate or if we're not decreasing now, we're not declining now, and the new normal is at best stagnation. If that trend doesn't stop, the new normal will be continual contraction. And that would definitely pose, not a risk, not a threat. It will guarantee declining standards of living. And that's even without a population increase. That just your income per capita, your GDP per capita, your purchasing power will continue to decline no matter how few people come in or how few capita we actually have.
Exactly. And more on what Aaron's up to when we return on the Financial Survival Network.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Are you worried about the coming dollar collapse? Then Borderless Holdings, formerly known as Owings Metals, is the place to go. Gold and silver are the key to protecting your wealth from a declining dollar. Call them now at 855-604-6343. The Borderless Holdings team will eliminate the anxiety and take the guesswork out of your precious metals buying decision. I recently purchased silver bullion from them at the lowest possible price. Would you believe I got my metals delivered in less than a week? Seth Peretzman, Kevin Drost, and the guys at Borderless Holdings are great people who pride themselves on providing the highest level of service to all their clients and always exceed your expectations. Call them now at 855-604-6343. That's 855-604-6343, or visit them at www.borderlessholdings.com and tell them Kerry sent you.
FSN Radio.
When your accountant wants tax-free income, this is what he does. Accountants know the law. They also know that any American could legally get paid up to 3 times per month, 100% tax-free. That's 36 tax-free checks each year. It doesn't matter what you make already. This simple strategy could work for anyone. Go to www.irsrevenge2.com to learn how. That's irsrevenge2.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And we're back with Captain Capitalism, a.k.a. Aaron Clarey. And Aaron, that's what we're talking about, perhaps a lost decade or a lost generation because we have no growth, no economic growth. And these things can go on, really, as you see in Japan, for a generation or more, right? I mean, they can just keep
absolutely.
Going.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, let me tell you an interesting story. My old man, huge Democrat all the time. And he would get into it with me when I was younger, you're just a kid, you don't know, blah, blah, blah. Well, now the guy is 65 and he's finally come around because he's got to pay property taxes and they keep going up because of the teachers union. And he did some math. He's like, wait a minute. We can educate kids in the private schools for 40% what it's costing in the public schools, and we'll get even better results. And so that set him off on exploration. And now, 40, almost 50 years later, he admits I'm right. Well, if you can remain that brainwashed, and this guy is a baby boomer. He's not a Gen Xer. He's not a millennial. If you can remain brainwashed for 50, 40, heck, even 60 years, and then you come around 10 years before you die, it's too late. Mm-hmm. And that's my fear, is you're never going to get these kids, especially with the brainwashing they receive in school, K through college, then the media, for them to take some really independent thought and start thinking things through. And heaven forbid we start studying economics and look things up on the federal budget and read Austrian economists or something like that. Heaven forbid we do that. It's not just a generation. It could be a permanent stasis for the American psyche and zeitgeist.
That's a little scary, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's what I'm afraid that's what it is. Not to sound so pessimistic, but you still have, not to keep hitting on the baby boomers, you still got about half of them that still think the 60s were great. And maybe it was because of the sex, but the economic policy coming from that decade was not the best. But they still believe it. And if you got your quote elder, wiser generation still swallowing poppycock, like, well, we'll just increase aggregate demand by spending more government money, it's hopeless. The Republic is lost. The Titanic is sinking, and I think it's time to light up some cigars and drink some good scotch.
So you really think it's hopeless, huh?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I had that book, Enjoy the Decline, and
sure.
Because and that's why I wrote it, because I do think it's hopeless, and you got to make a choice with your life. Are you going to battle against it and rally against it in the hope that you and millions of other type people can turn it around, or do you realize you can't fight ignorance? You just it's too, the horse is out of the barn, or the cats are being herded, or whatever the saying is, and you say, you know what, I'm going to die. I get this one finite life. I'm done with this racket. There is no solution. There's nothing I can do. So I'm going to go and enjoy my life and do whatever that is before I die.
Yeah, well, there's definitely something to be said for it, because there is a thing called futility, and if the world's really willing to, hitch their tent with the collectivists and, just basically give up on any form of capitalism or individual initiative, then what is the point, right? Right.
Yeah, I like me. I enjoy my life. I didn't sign up to be part of a commune, and it looks like that's what the general trend, the general psyche of the nation is. And you can always say, well, it's because they were brainwashed in the schools and the media and the government. Yeah, and it's 100% true. That doesn't change the fact that that's what the reality is. And if it's up to me, and no way, man, no way. And that's why investing in gold and silver, scaling back production. I don't want to be too productive. I don't want to work too hard. I want to trade my labor for leisure if I can. I'm not having kids, and I'm just I'm going to Las Vegas in 48 hours, and I'm riding this pony until it's dead, and I'll be in my nursing home, my government paid for nursing home, of course, and there'll be staph infections, and Lord knows it'll look like a horrible Soviet gulag style retirement community. But at least for the first 75 years of my life, it was on my terms, and I had a lot of fun.
Hey, and there's something to be said for that, right?
Yep, absolutely. I didn't waste it. You ever hear William Shatner's song, You're Gonna Die?
No, I'm not familiar with that one, but
look it up. It is hilarious. That should be the theme song for every economist out there and every listener to the Financial Survival Network. You should listen to William Shatner's "You're Gonna Die." It's great.
Yeah, well, there's some, you are going to die. So what are you waiting for? That's always been my philosophy about these things, Aaron. It's like, if you're going to anyway, then, you shouldn't defer happiness, and you shouldn't defer your goals, right?
Right. And the other thing that I've kind of focused on, and this is something kind of the pot calling the kettle black on my end, because it's something I got to work on. I think everyone would benefit from it too, is try not to get upset, certainly be upset, certainly be disagreeable with where the country is going, certainly mourn and rue what's happening to the country, but don't let that anger or frustration overcome you.
Yeah, don't be bitter.
I look at you can read Drudge, you can read Zero Hedge, you can read your local news, you can just see it every day, you can look at the welfare bum using the EBT card. it's outside of your control. Don't let that ruin your life. Don't let it ruin your day. So that all of a sudden, you go and pick up some groceries and you see the welfare queen on buying cigarettes with her EPT card, and then you go home and you yell at your kids or you're a little bit curt with your wife. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just like, you know what? Her life is worse than mine. I'm going to go and I'm going to light up a cigar that she probably can't afford, and I'm going to go kiss my wife who's way hotter than her. I'm going to go play with my kids who aren't going to become criminals like hers. You got to look at that, not to sound so, don't worry, be happy, but don't let the dark side ruin your life or consume you.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You shouldn't let the dark side, ruin or get you down. Don't let them get you down, because then they've won. So I think that's really the important part.
Yeah. To quote Stefan Molyneux, you're already paying enough in financial taxes. Do not pay any more than you have to in emotional taxes. Mm-hmm. There's just no reason. Just let them, and just go fish, go smoke, lie on a beach, go do something. Mm-hmm. But, don't let the fact that, the illegal alien situation down on the border, I'm trying to use that as like a practice.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's happening. What am I going to do? Oh, well, nothing. I guess I'm going to smoke now. So.
Yeah. Nothing you can do about it. I think it's AA. Change the things you can and accept the things that you can't. Right?
Correct. Yep.
And most of it, what's going on in society and in the nation's capital, you have zero power over. So you know what? There's no point in letting it upset you and get you down. And it's a really important thing, because that is one of the keys to happiness, Aaron, is really, fix the things about yourself and your immediate surroundings and your family situation that you have control over. But the things that you don't, which are the headlines, because let's face it, what are you going to do? You're going to go down to the border yourself with a AK-47 and set that border straight? I don't think so. Yeah,
you'll end up in jail. That's where you'll end up. I wrote a great piece that's very directly appropriate for this. And it's called "Controlling Your Microenvironment," and it's along the same lines: control what you can, don't worry about what you can't. Exactly. But more so focusing on your family, your friends, things that are important to you, things within your control. And also like where you move, where you live. Don't live in Minneapolis. Don't live in Detroit. Don't live in Cleveland. Don't live in Chicago. Don't go to Illinois. Right. Go to Florida. Go to Texas. Go to Utah. Go, low tax states and local communities even. It's like a city is nothing but a big homeowners association. And if you live with a bunch of liberal people, they're going to jack up your association dues. So go find a small little conservative town and surround yourself with good quality people. That's all that matters.
And on that note, Aaron, just tell us where we find you, where we get your books.
You can find me for my blog. It's CaptainCapitalism.blogspot.com. Books, just go Amazon.com and search Aaron Clarey. You'll find them. There's my YouTube channel. Just search Aaron Clarey. And then also my consulting company, assholeconsulting.com. No, it's not a joke. It's 100% true. I'll let you guys look at that if you want and see what that's all about.
All right. And links are found in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Aaron, we'll talk with you again real soon.
Thanks for having me, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.